Well, this is part two of cutting up a front quarter of a deer. I was doing part two and almost to the end, and I get a phone call from my real job about a question. I forgot I was recording, so that kind of messed up that video. Maybe I can get an editing program and put them together. Anyway, we're just continuing cleaning up this shoulder, and my light went out. I better unplug that because I don't know if I blew a fuse or what happened there. Maybe, hopefully, looks like my light just burned out. So I guess you won't be able to see my good looks anymore, but hopefully we'll be able to finish getting this deer cleaned. Now the front shoulders, like I said, is quite a bony piece of meat. I guess you can do it as a roast, I'm told. Generally, I just get most of my ground beef or ground venison from there. Not hard to bone out. You got your shoulder blade bone right here that I'm cleaning up. This is cartilage. The older it gets, the bonier it gets. Otherwise, I just go along and take off pieces of meat here and there. It's all seams. It's made up of a lot of meat. The front shoulder is kind of a tougher piece because it moves so much. You know, pretty much no. It's like the neck. You know, no movement is made on a deer or cow where the front shoulder isn't involved, especially the leg part of it. You know, but it does make good burger. Nothing wrong with that. Doesn't matter how tough it is when it's ground up, because I've never seen anybody really gnawing on a hamburger because it was too tough to chew. Anyway, I'll just keep on trimming these little, trim away the fat, then trim away the meat from the bone. If this was a cow, it'd be a little bit easier to explain what's what on it, just because of size. Deer are a lot smaller and the pieces are a lot smaller. The hind quarter was a little bit easier to explain because, you know, it's plain, more well-defined muscle than the front shoulder. The front shoulder, like I said, made up of a lot of little pieces making one, which is what makes it tougher. This just a little muscle that helps the leg move. Usually you can grind some of that. Usually the tips of it are too tough. That's the connective tissue where it connects it to the bone or to another muscle. Usually there's nothing you can do with it except cut it off, throw it away, feed it to the crows, coyotes, or whatever other scavengers you have around. Now we'll flip it over to the back side. Maybe I can explain a little bit on the back side of what's what. Just kind of cleaning off a little of this fat off of the outside so that I don't have to do it once I cut it. And then I'm going to show different parts of this a little bit. knife's getting dull. Where people get cut more with a dull knife than they do a sharp knife. The reason for that is sharp knife, you're just gliding through, not much effort involved. Dull knife, you're pushing and working against yourself with it, and that's how slips occur and cuts happen. Now we pretty much got the outside cleaned off of here, so I'm gonna, if you take this, got two pieces here. One is a what you call a top blade, rides along there. This top part here is the blade roast. I'm going to show you how this would. Get that off there and the seam. Now this is a tougher piece. Once again, it's off the shoulder. There's a piece of sinew in there. I want to clean out. Now when you go to a restaurant, they've discovered that cutting the shoulder, normally the shoulder top blade would have been cut this way, but they've discovered that if you take the skins off of them, which you normally would do anyway, even cutting it the other way, but anyway, you clean it off and then you take that piece out of the middle to where you got a nice flat little piece of meat. Restaurants discovered that they can charge you 10 times as much if they call that a flat iron steak. I've never had one. I never ate it. It's something that's new. It was big on the East Coast and is now across the country. A lot of chefs on TV use that. Don't know how it would be off a deer. It cuts really easy, nice and tender. Actually, I might save that. I might throw that in my pan and fry it up, see how it was. But people are always trying to find new ways of doing stuff. And it's good. With the internet, you can pretty much find a recipe for anything. Now venison, it's more than just frying it in a pan like it used to be. When I was growing up, we'd use a bone saw on it. We cut in the winter after they hung till the end of the season in the shed, and use a bone saw on them. And I never liked the taste of it because of the bone dust in it. The bone dust was not a desirable taste to me. It smelled like burning hair when you cut it. Here I'm just taking the shoulder blade bone off. Now I'm going to clean up this part of the leg. The closer you get down the lower leg, the tougher it gets because, once again, movement. I'll just keep on cutting and seaming and skinning and cleaning her up, and when I'm done, I'll have a nice little tub of meat. I'll have some meat for grinding. I'll have some meat for some nice back straps. and if I want, I can do some stew. Don't know that I will. This will be a decent little piece of meat for stew. You know, it's gonna be a little bit tougher. I'm thinking I'll grind it. I have more uses for ground meat or ground venison than I do stew. I did make some nice roast off of the hind quarter, so not gonna bother with roast off the front. Maybe if had been a lot bigger deer, I would have. But I don't have any ground, so ground venison you can use for a lot of things as itself. If you don't add anything to it, a lot of people will add beef or pork. If I'm making brats or sausage, I'll add a third of pork. Usually I'll use pork butt because the natural meat to fat ratio is it's like the perfect mix. Use a third of pork to 2/3 of venison. You don't want it to taste like ground pork, you want it to taste like venison. But sometimes, for some things, like a brat, venison is just too dry because it's too lean. But if you add that pork, gives it a nice flavor, gives it a nice little mix, and it gives it the right amount of juice. Now if I'm using spaghetti or lasagna or tacos, no reason to add anything. Grinder straight out, you're adding moisture to it with your sauces and whatever, and it's kind of like ground turkey. You know, ground turkey's a pretty lean animal, but you start adding the other things to it, and not only is it good for you, but it's a pretty decent tasting. Now this is the shank. Actually, I've done pigs, I've cured them and smoked them, and even though they are very sinuous and full of tendons, once you cure it and smoke it, it is excellent in bean soups. I've actually picked them up and just ate them. Very good flavor. The curing process, I would be guessing, is what makes them tender. And see, you look at that, that's a pretty tough looking piece of meat. Now I'm going to just grind these. I'll clean up a little bit of this stuff off the outside of it and the main pieces that run down the middle, because otherwise it's just going to clog up my grinder. I could actually go through and follow the seams on this and end up with completely lean, tender meat. Not necessarily tender, completely lean meat with no sinew in it, but there would literally be almost nothing left of it because it's got so much connective tissue. And you go, the more you cut, the more you run into. Now I'm going to clean up this other bloody one. I'm going to turn the video off. I'm tired of talking. But that's how you cut up a deer. You got your stew, your back straps, your tenderloins, your neck, and your front shoulders to do with as you wish. And that's all for today.